Hi, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. It's been a couple of meetings since I've given you a council recap, but to be fair, at the last one, we actually tabled every significant item. One of those came back up tonight. This was a preliminary open meeting discussion of our housing tax credit process. That is the process by which we evaluate and either lend our support to a process for low-income developers, or I should say low-income housing developers, to apply to the state for tax credits for their development projects. I'll touch on that more later since that was the most significant item for discussion, so I'll review everything else first. We actually had a presentation regarding collaborative arts in Plano. So they're proposing that we move forward, and we are, by the way, moving forward with developing a cultural arts plan similar to not just the comprehensive plan, our master parks plan, but several other plans we have in the works. So this will actually create a thoughtful and deliberate roadmap toward promoting the arts in Plano. And something I said on the dais that occurred to me was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson in one of his lectures. He was talking about how hundreds of years ago in Europe, the thought and the creativity and the care that was given to art and architecture and the arts in general at the time, today has translated to an incalculable value, not just in tourist dollars from visitors to cathedrals, castles, etc., that just aren't made like this anymore. He was contrasting the architecture in Europe a few hundred years ago to modern architecture in Canada and the US. There's just no comparison. But they, whether or not they were deliberately thinking through that to create such incalculable value centuries in the future, the same principle applies. So by thoughtfully thinking through how we can promote the arts, and through arts that lends to creativity. Some people view the arts as just a side interest. They're not where the real value is. I disagree, because engineering and sciences without creativity would never have got us beyond the invention of the wheel. So I think that's a necessary infusion to advance us forward with all sorts of practical applications, not least of which is the collection of tourism. So even though we may no longer be on council or may not even be alive when we realize the fruits of these efforts, I think it's well worth planning a long road toward the development of them in Plano. We also talked about the mid-year budget reestimate. So we plan our budget cycles based on projections of sales tax, water and sewer revenues, etc. We had a sales tax surplus of $2 million, which we are going to plow back into the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund, I'm very proud to say, was something that I proposed early on after I was elected in 2019, and which we were able to make happen. So with this, we will have about $5.5 million in our rainy day fund. And I also asked tonight that in the future, we have a very deliberate council discussion about putting restrictions on using the money in the rainy day fund for actual rainy days. Actually, I should say actual figurative rainy days, not actual rainy days. We also had a $10 million surplus in water and sewer revenues, in addition to a $1.1 million rebate from the North Texas Municipal Water District, total of $11.1 million. There was considerable discussion, this was brought up first by Mayor Pro Tem Prince, of what we're going to do with the money in light of the rate increases we just had, because we passed through a lot of expenses from, all the expenses from the North Texas Municipal Water District, both in terms of water and sewer, but also solid waste collection, trash collection, because that all goes to the landfill, which is owned by the North Texas Municipal Water District. So we just increased rates, but we're collecting a $10 million surplus. So we want to make sure that amount goes toward reducing rates next year, or at least offsetting any potential rate increases next year. So there are some immediate purposes to which we can put some of that money now. One is $2 million basically for a generator at a pump station, which is critical toward keeping water going in the city. And then there are some overages for a few sewer maintenance projects that we can transfer $5 million to cover those overages. But what Mayor Pro Tem Prince and I said that is we would want to see a similar offset when we go through our budgeting next year. So since we're covering these expenses now with a $5 million transfer to the sewer CIP and a $2 million transfer to the capital maintenance fund for the generator, that we basically borrow from the future when we go through our next budgeting process to make up the balance of that 10 or really $11.1 million in the next budgeting cycle, so we offset any potential rate increase in the future as well. Basically, we don't want to raise the rates on our people and then stick it to them by plowing a surplus elsewhere. Now, we moved along to the regular meeting. Actually, we started the housing tax credit presentation during preliminary open. In the regular meeting, we had 3 different awards presented to City of Plano departments. So the first was the Plano Technology Solutions GIS team. Were awarded with the Distinguished Systems Award for the Fire Electronic Tactical Response Guides Program. Congratulations. The Plano Planning Department and Tech Solutions Department received the 2022 Government Experience Project Award for the Zoning Alert Tool and the Response Map. So the idea for the Zoning Alert Tool came from Dr. Jorn Solomon, who was on the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee in the development of our new comprehensive plan. And it allows anyone in the city to sign up to receive zoning, basically alerts in email whenever there is a new zoning request or zoning movement. You can specify where in the city you want to receive these alerts from. So they won the award for that, for making it happen. And also the Plano Communications and Community Outreach Departments and Media Relations Department received multiple awards for efforts, including Stoller on the Street series, which will drop its 83rd episode tomorrow. One item from the consent agenda was pulled to individual consideration. That was to eliminate on-street parking on one side of the street next to Preston Meadow Park. Now, the reason for this was because it's a 26-foot standard, 26-foot wide street, but our fire department, when they ran a routine test there, they were unable to get a fire truck through that. However, that eliminates all on-street parking for the entire southern side of the park, and the playgrounds for that side. There's some parking elsewhere, but it's an issue. There is a project in the CIP that would alleviate that, but it's not expected to be complete until the summer of 2024. So it was originally proposed that we pass this, and then we will bring it before council to repeal the lack of on-street parking at that time. I said I could support this with an expiration date because, government programs or ordinances in this case, they just have a habit of not going away on their own. So if it's passed with an expiration date, that's going to force it to come back before council. And I really did have reservations about eliminating all on-street parking on that side. But if the fire trucks cannot make it through, that's a paramount consideration. We also adopted the youth program standards of care for the city. Long story short, because we offer various programs through our Parks and Rec for youth, they would otherwise constitute a daycare because you can drop your kids off and they will be cared for a period of time in those programs. But municipalities can apply for an exemption for being a licensed daycare operator as long as they pass this youth program standards of care every year. And so we passed that for this year. Now back to the housing tax credit process. Pardon me. This is the process whereby developers of low-income housing can apply for a tax credit through the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. So there's either a 9% or a 4% housing tax credit. Now, they can get points, basically when they go in front of the TDHCA, Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, they're assessed points based on a variety of factors. The city, based on issuing letters of support, letters of no objection, etc., and a few other levers, can increase those points. Now, when I joined council in 2019, we were presented a case where I saw a significant issue with two competing tax credit projects. One was receiving a bazillion points. They received a set of points for every housing tax credit project they had built throughout the state. And so by virtue of having done 20 of these, however many it was, they amassed so many points that it was impossible for the competing applicant to have a hope. Now, that doesn't speak to the quality of the project or how it meets the needs of the community. It's just, how often have you done this? There, you get the award, basically. And so we started tinkering with the process. Came back again, we passed the changes, and then there were other issues. And then we sent it back again. This is the third time we had considered changes to the housing tax credit process in the 3.5 years that I've been on council. So that suggests to me that tinkering around the edges isn't really accomplishing anything. There's something foundational that's wrong with this. So Councilman Grady proposed that we put this whole program on ice for a year, on a hiatus, and we bring in an independent consultant to assess what we're doing and how we're doing it, and develop an actual program that isn't sourced from within. That will be moving forward. We will be putting this whole program on hold for a year and bringing in an independent consultant to ask the tough questions and make the tough assessments, and then bring some recommendations before council. As many of you know, I have some concerns with the whole affordable housing moniker to begin with, because two things are invariably conflated. One is taxpayer subsidized housing, which a housing tax credit is, and the other is housing that is affordable. We definitely need more housing that is affordable. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be taxpayer subsidized. There are a number of things we as council can, and I believe should do, to promote an environment in our city where housing is more affordable. That doesn't necessarily mean throwing tax dollars at it. So that's it for tonight's recap. I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. Thank you and God bless.